Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om, 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 Om Guru, Om Swami Sri Yukteswar. And welcome back, everybody, to this week's discussion on the Holy Science written by Swami Sri Yukteswar. And this is the 8th and final class in this series, and it's been a really fun journey. And this evening I'd like to, again, as I've done before, recapitulate this discussion that we've had, and then go into it a few final points that I'd like to share with everybody on this great scripture. Now, if Swami Sri Yukteswar, I think one of the reasons that people often comment how difficult this book is to understand is because in the very first chapter, what he discusses, and which we did not discuss in this class series, is the descent of consciousness from that absolute oneness of Brahman down into creation itself. And it's very, very esoteric, very, very difficult to understand. I remember there was a story from the life of Paramhansa Yogananda where this was being discussed in his presence, how somebody mentioned how difficult it was to understand what Swami Sri Yukteswar was saying. And this one lady that was overheard this comment said, "Oh, I didn't find it very difficult. It seemed quite easy and simple, straightforward to me." And Paramhansa Yogananda didn't say anything, but then outside of that lady's presence, he somewhat said confidentially to this person who expressed difficulty, he says, "Even I find it rather difficult." And so I didn't go into that part of the book because really that's not the real question that concerns us. How we got here, why we're here. That's more interesting perhaps, but really the real important question is, what do we do about it? And I think this is what Swami Sri Yukteswar, that portion of the book where he gives the suggestions on how step by step the soul frees itself. My soul, your soul, all souls free themselves. We go through a common procedure by which we rise back up into divinity, and it's universal. And I think this is an important point to keep in mind, that the journey back to God is a universal experience that applies to everybody, and essentially we all travel the same path. The Hindu, the Christian, the Buddhist, the Muslim, we are all traveling the same path, and a certain procedure or a certain step-by-step process takes place, and that's what we've been discussing in these 8 classes, and tonight we'll wrap that up. But I do want to recapitulate just a little bit, and then I'll bring up my notes, just a little bit to now the step-by-step, where we started and where we're going. Now, if you remember, Swamiji, or Swami Sri Yukteswar, and we talked about the pranava sound, the sound of Om. And before I get into this discussion, I'd like to bring up a question that was asked. I thought it was a very good question, and it applies to what I'm going to go over and discuss a little bit today in this recapitulation. And the question was this: are there any saints or yogis who have much joy and peace but do not see the spiritual eye or hear the Om sound? Now this refers, as I've discussed previously as we've talked about this procedure, the appearance of the Om sound and the appearance of the spiritual eye. The spiritual eye is that gateway, that Shushumna Dwara, that gateway into the Shushumna that we pass through, and that is necessary for all of us to go through that. And as we do that, this Om sound begins to manifest. Now the question I'm taking this, are there saints or yogis who have much joy and peace but do not see the spiritual eye or hear the Om. And of course, yes, there are, because it really, we have to clarify our terms. What are the saints? What are yogis? People who have made great spiritual progress that, but perhaps don't hear these sounds. Well, if you describe a saint or yogi as someone who has reached the ultimate, the answer would be no. But the fact is that ultimate realization is it's not common. All of us travel that path, but we see ourselves in worldly situations, and very few people even take up the spiritual path. As Krishna says, only 1 in 1,000 seeks me. And of those who do seek me, only 1 in 1,000 realize my reality, my presence. So that's 1 in a million. So it's not very common, but yet there are many. We could call, definitely they're yogis, those who are aspiring and have seriously taken up the spiritual quest. We can call those yogis, then those people yogis. And so yes, all of us, we can experience deep peace. We can experience joy, we can experience all of these, and we can experience deep states of consciousness without having these experiential realities manifest to us of the spiritual eye or the sound of Om. But, this is the but, nevertheless, to overcome this world of suffering that we find ourselves in, which propels us onto the spiritual path, there does come a point where, yes, we do need to be able to hear that inner sound, and that inner sound will come, and we see that spiritual eye, and that will come. But these come naturally when we reach a certain state of development. But before that state, of course, we can experience joy, but we also continue to experience suffering. Yes, we can feel great peace, but we're also going to experience restlessness and lack of motivation at times when we don't feel joy. In other words, we remain in this world of duality, of the ups and downs. And I think if we were to describe a saint as somebody who had transcended this world of duality, then no, that person will have experienced those deep states of the Om sound and the spiritual eye. And I'd like to read something that Paramhansa Yogananda wrote. And he addresses this very, very squarely. He says, while prayer and meditation are good, and we should practice, we must not forget that the purpose of meditation is to receive this Holy Ghost, in other words, the Om sound. That is the tangible expression of God. And the sound is the easiest way to approach God. No one, if he doesn't know the Om vibration or Amen vibration, can get there. That he concludes it with the short sentences by saying, that is all there is to it. In other words, we have to come to that realization, because it is a natural step. But I say this is because people, they hear that or they read that and they hear perhaps what I've been saying over the last number of weeks, and it can be a little bit discouraging because, oh my God, I don't ever hear that sound. I can't see the spiritual eye. And it makes it seem like it's, I haven't made very much progress, and one begins to feel unfit. And I don't want to convey that impression. The fact that a person is even wanting God is very good karma. As Paramhansa Yogananda said to one of the monks who was a little bit feeling down about his karma and he wasn't making this progress that he had hoped to make, he said, remember, it takes very, 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 very good karma even to want to know God. And so with that, and when you want to know God, that's the very first step, because God has to respond. All desires, they say, must be fulfilled, and that desire for God is the highest of desires, and ultimately that too must come to fulfillment. So take heart. The fact that you're even attending a class like this where we're speaking about these sorts of realities seems to me to say that there's an aspiration there that is seeking to be satisfied, and that's a great step. But it's only a beginning. It's only a beginning. We have to keep that aspiration alive, and to the degree that we're interested in these things, mean we want to know what are the steps that need to be taken to be able to get to the goal that we're all seeking. And that's when I'm prefacing my next remarks with that, because what Swami Sri Yukteswar and the journey that we've discussed over these last 8 weeks is summarized by this outline I'd like to share with you. By regulation of the breath as directed, that inner sound, that pranava sound, spontaneously appears and becomes audible. You see, if we, and this is of course for those of you who understand Kriya Yoga, we begin to gain control of the life force within the body. By that regulation, as directed by the Guru, that sound spontaneously appears. You don't have to work at it in the sense of, oh, I've got to listen. It comes of its own. It's all of a sudden, it's been there all the time, and now we begin to recognize this. And when this sound appears, the breath is regulated. In other words, we gain a control over those life force currents that are behind the breath, and it checks the decay of the material body. Now, when he says the breath is regulated, he's also meaning that there's a state of breathlessness comes. We regulate it in the sense we stop it. Now, this is a very advanced state. And the person who just comes on to these teachings and begins meditating, I'm even a little reluctant to even bring that topic up because, one, it seems beyond comprehension and possibility, and two, it can be discouraging. Oh my gosh, I have to go all the way to there. But remember, this comes naturally as we begin to interiorize our consciousness, as we begin to practice the teachings as taught to us, by the Guru, we begin to find that this process is very, very natural. It's not foreign. It's who we are. And don't think of it as foreign. Think of it, this is just a matter of me removing some of the obstacles that separates me from this goal. And the sound, as Swami Sri Yukteswar says, the sound appears in different forms according to the state of advancement and according to the purification of the heart. And actually, this vibration appears more than just in sound. There's feeling, there's light, love itself is an expression of Om. Remember those 8 aspects of God that we teach when you learn Raja Yoga, God appears in 8 primary aspects. All of those are an expression in some form or another of Om. And that Om vibration begins to manifest naturally, and we begin to derive that inspiration. But the sound that we begin to hear depends upon our state of advancement. And of course, this is an area of study in yoga, which we won't go into here, what those various sounds might be. But for those of us who are Kriyabans, these words emphasize the importance of doing our practice while keeping the presence of the Guru in our heart. Remember, and this is as we've discussed in these classes, we gain the magnetism through the process of purifying our heart, developing that magnetism to actually attract God to us. We think of, people often say this, I got to go find my Guru. Well, it's a nice way of saying it, but really what happens is we have to attract the Guru to us by our magnetism. When the time is ready and our magnetism is high and we've purified, then we draw that Guru's presence to us. And the Guru appears when the disciple is ready, as it's often said. So you don't worry about finding your Guru and going to the other side of the world. it'll appear when the time is right for you in your own particular form. And this is the point where we must keep this in mind. How do we develop that magnetism? And this is what we've concentrated on a number of the classes that we've shared. It's the development of the heart's natural love. This is the beginning point and the ending point, you might say. The development, the Guru will come into that environment. We have to create the right environment in the heart, and it will come. And how do we do that? Well, remember what we talked about, removing meannesses of the heart, anger, envy, greed, those sorts of desires, pride of pedigree, false sense of respectability, those 8 meannesses of the heart, but all of their iterations, as long as they're there, we don't have an environment in which the seeds of the heart's natural love can sprout. It's like poison in the ground. And you make a little progress and those meannesses come out and your plant withers. And then try again. But as long as we keep trying, eventually we learn and we begin to purify. When the pure love begins to appear in the heart, naturally one becomes disposed to avoid worldly company. In other words, one begins to be sensitive to one's surroundings, people, situations, input that comes in. Some things just don't feel good and you want to avoid it. Other things, are more attractive. And you'll find that your natural environment will begin to change. And you want to keep spiritual company. By keeping spiritual company, we attract, ultimately, the company of great souls, the teachings that we're practicing, and eventually we attract the Guru. And this great desire arises in the human heart to save oneself, as the way Swami Sri Yukteswar, the desire to save oneself. So from what? From the continued suffering and that one feels. One wants to rise above it. As Paramhansa Yogananda said, he says, there comes a time and when the soul's evolution, when we reach that point, when the world of life, death, birth, life, birth, death, again and again, it becomes agonizingly monotonous. And we just long to get out of it and to go somewhere else. And that, as painful as that is, it does impel us. And as we advance, then we attract the Guru, and as we advance, we begin to, our attention is drawn into the inner spine, and we begin to hear those sounds. And through the inner focus, we merge into that sound. And as I explained in last week's class and the class before that, we're spiritually baptized. We enter into that inner stream of the inner sound, which is the true inner baptism. And it's at this point, you could say when we purify ourselves, we become a true disciple, and then we baptize ourselves in that inner sound. And it's in this way we slowly perfect ourselves. We begin to hear the Om sound, we begin to draw from our consciousness away from the outer world of matter, and we enter what's from Bhuloka into what's known as Bhuvarloka, that inner astral world, and we perceive the light, and we begin to perceive those 7 chakras. But we begin to rise in that inner world, we begin to rise up through those chakras, and we begin to gain the knowledge of them, and we begin to gain the inspiration and the release that energy that is blocked in them, and adds to that upward welling energy. And we pass through them, and we enter into, as we discussed last week, into Swarloka, where we perceive, what's said, as Sri Yukteswar says, that we perceive the astral form of our body around the heart, the astral heart. And we then ultimately pass from that loka into what's known as Maharloka, which is the realm of what Swami Kriyananda said. This is the realm, and Sri Yukteswar says, is the realm of Jivan Mukta. We become Jivan Mukta. And this sounds so fantastically far beyond our reality here in this world, but it's simply a matter of learning to overcome the likes and dislikes and regulate, you could say, regulate the ups and downs of our life, and to be calm and calm, centered in our inner heart. And this is the essence of yoga. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha, neutralization of the likes and dislikes of the heart. And by putting it into very obscure language, it makes it seem like it's very far, but it's not. And Swami Kriyananda used to always tell us, he said, make it, every disciple, every Kriyaban has the capacity, as Paramhansa Yogananda describes it in his autobiography, and has the capacity to free himself in this lifetime. And we should all make it our goal to become Jivan Mukta in this lifetime, which would be, in terms of what Swami Sri Yukteswar says, that would be reaching that state of Maharloka. That's 4th out of 7 lokas. That is the critical step, because at that point we have, you might say, transmuted the ego consciousness, released that bondage, and once we can reach that point, we have that state of Jivan Mukta, free while living. We're in the state, as Paramhansa Yogananda said, once we reach that state, we have reached that state of nirvikalpa samadhi. And there's no turning, we won't be pulled back. Now, lower states of samadhi, we can become back to duality, back to bondage. But once we reach that state, then the further states beyond that, you might say it doesn't matter so much. Ultimately, of course, we want to reach that states, but we have to work out residual karma that may still be with us. He says, it's okay. Yes, we have to go through that karma perhaps to work it out, but he says we know deep inside of ourselves that we have that freedom and nothing can take it away from us again. It's just then a matter of time and our individual karma. So this is the potential for each of us, and this is the point that Paramhansa Yogananda makes in his autobiography. This potential is open to every one of us if we would take that. And if we would take the opportunity by practicing the techniques that have been offered to us. And if we don't attain that goal in this lifetime, very likely that is the case for many or most of us. But yet, as it says in the Bhagavad Gita, one who treads this path faithfully to the end will pick it up and be reborn in a good environment in a future life to take this up again. And you could say what we have done at that point, we have drawn the grace of the Guru's protection to guide us. Just like in the autobiography, how Babaji says to Lahiri Mahashaya that he watched over him. He passed from his previous life and he was reborn in that body of Lahiri, and he didn't realize his past lives. He said, but Babaji said, I have been watching you, guiding your footsteps until that moment where he once again met his Guru. And I feel very strongly that this is for each of us. Those of us who are sincere to the end, ultimately, we maybe pass from this lifetime, but the great ones have promised, as Paramhansa Yogananda said to his disciples, I or one of the masters will be with you at the time of your transition to guide you across the waters after death into whatever the future holds for you, into that astral realm for you. And again, maybe we're guided into the next life to pick up this path again. But why wait until the next life? Why not in this life? And that's, I think, for those of us who are serious about this, take up the path and follow what is being said there. So in answer to that question, going back to the initial question, take heart. The fact that we want God in this lifetime and that we will feel peace and joy. If you feel no peace and joy in the practice, then something's missing. Something's missing, and you should get counsel with people that you trust, people that you can speak with, people that are a little bit wiser than you to help guide you so that you can feel that peace and joy. But I will tell you a story. Paramhansa Yogananda was speaking with a saint. No, that's too much. He was speaking with a monastic, I believe it was, or a priest in the Catholic tradition. And they were talking about spiritual state, spiritual advancement. And Paramhansa Yogananda asked the man, I believe he was a priest, have you had any inner experiences of lights or sound, referring a little bit to what we've been talking about? And the priest said, no, but when God chooses to give me such graces, he will do so. Now that sounds like a nice answer, but Paramhansa Yogananda countered him. He says, no, that's not right. And it's your devotion is lackluster. And because your devotion is lackluster, you have not had those experiences. And in other words, they will come, they have to come when our devotion is strong enough and we sustain that devotion. God will respond, but not necessarily in the way or in the time that we might wish. Some may take his time, but however it is, God will come. Keep that thought foremost in your mind. Now, in our last class, I spoke about you could say the states that we go through, and we reach this state of the fourth loka after Swarloka to this state of Jivan Mukta. I mentioned the various things that happen as one progresses along that path, and I made reference to a very fascinating topic, and that's the various what are known as siddhis that appear, or as Swami Sri Yukteswar says, he calls them the Aiswaryas that appear. And I thought I'd mention them because Swami Sri Yukteswar does mention these. He says these appear naturally. But I do want to say that these are not things that should be pursued in themselves, because sometimes people, they hear about these things because it's the tradition that great masters have certain powers. And people don't believe that, but it's been demonstrated throughout the ages that there are some interesting things when a person is a very advanced soul that can happen. But to seek them for themselves, for their powers, is said to be a dangerous thing, because to seek them for their own sake is a sign of egotism. And that's not helpful for us. But they appear spontaneously. And one of them is anima, which basically means being able to reduce oneself to smallness. Now, I have no idea how that manifests or what that is about, honestly. But the opposite of it is to make oneself large, to increase one's size. To enlarge oneself, one's consciousness perhaps, but also perhaps physically. But a little bit more understanding is the ability to be light in weight, another weightless. And it's often been a tradition in spiritual traditions of levitation. They lose, gravity has no effect on them. Now, that's a very interesting thing. And I think most people, they hear these, they like to think about these things because we're all fascinated by these sort of phenomenal things. But I think it's that levitation of saints is explained because that's one of the powers of losing gravity doesn't have an effect, and we lose lightness. The ability to become infinitely heavy, the opposite, you could say, of lightness. Also, there's a story of Master Paramhansa Yogananda when he was giving classes. When he was in his early days of going to the West, he tended to demonstrate these sorts of things to the public. He stopped doing it after a while, but I think he did it because it drew an audience, it made people curious, but of course he began to realize that he noticed that it was a little bit, people were interested in the phenomena, but they were not interested in what was behind the phenomena, and he realized that that was not it was not something he did in his later years. But in his early years, when he would first come to America, to break the stiffness, you might say, of people's thinking, he would get on stage and he would ask a group, 4, 5, 6 very burly policemen to come up on stage, and they would ask them to push. And he would position himself, and they would ask him to push on his stomach and to try to move him. And so these 5 or 6 burly policemen would, try to push him, but he became immovable. They couldn't budge him. And sometimes what he would do is he would let his stomach go in, and then he would all of a sudden push his stomach out real quickly when all of them were pushing on it, and he would fling them all back onto their, under their backs, you might say, and to demonstrate. But he was immovable, and it's basically one of those powers. Another one of his is the ability to obtain anything one wishes. In other words, as it said in the Bible, if one wishes to move the mountain will move. And you gain this ability that your word becomes, the world will accommodate itself to your word, and which is a very interesting one. The ability to bring anything under one's control. You can basically control forces around you. There was that story of Mr. Oliver Black, one of Paramhansa Yogananda's foremost disciples. He came to visit Yogananda in Los Angeles, and Yogananda said, let's go for a drive. You just go out driving. But Mr. Black looked out the window, and it was raining cats and dogs, really, really hard. And he said, oh gosh. And so we're not going to be able to go. But he said Master wanted to go, and he was ready to go, and called them down to come down, and they'd be ready to go. He went down the stairs. He had his hat, he had his coat and his umbrella, went downstairs, went out the front door, and he got outside, and it was perfectly clear. When he was up in his room, it was raining, got there was not a cloud in the sky. And Mr. Black said, I never could figure out how he did that, but somehow he was able to alter the reality, and it's unexplainable, really, in rational terms. The ability to satisfy one's desires by will. In other words, one's will becomes commanding, controlling on the environment. But I think you could explain that as one is in tune with God's will, because you don't have individual egoic will. And this is, I think, those people that hear about these siddhis to keep in mind. To have individual egoic desire automatically disqualifies you from being able to have the power that you're seeking. Because one doesn't use egoic desire anymore. One only acts according to what the divine will is. One attunes oneself to the divine, and sometimes the divine will use the individual as an instrument to accomplish something outwardly. So Jesus Christ, can manifest, can heal. Jesus didn't heal. The power, God's power flowing, using that instrument of Jesus, healed. And so he was that, and because it was the will that happened. And I think keeping that in mind, we should remind ourselves that it's God's will. And so when we pray to God for this, we pray for that, say, God, if it be thy will, not my will, let it be so, but only if it be thy will. So Christ was in tune with God's will, and it wasn't any individual will. And so this is something to keep in mind. And then the power to become Lord over everything. In other words, all powers come to one. But you can see by the very nature of these Aiswaryas why they're not helpful to discuss too much on the spiritual path. But because Swami Sri Yukteswar did list them, and we are studying them, I thought I would mention. But you can, if you want to go a little deeper into them, you can review them in the Holy Science and read about them. But interestingly, he lists these under his discussion, which we were concluding last week, of the different stages of the heart, the dark heart, the clean heart, propelled heart, steady heart, and so on. And the last of those 5 states of the heart, if you remember, was the clean heart. In other words, the heart is completely devoid of egoism, of impurity. It's purely in tune with divine will. And it's only in that state that these, you might say, one immersed in the state of superconsciousness, we become super in all ways. And it's that heart has to be purified. And so coming back to where we started, let us vow in this lifetime, or make it aspire in this lifetime, to become Jivan Mukta, to transcend the littleness of ego, to be able to go beyond the likes and dislikes, the pettiness, and to transcend by offering ourselves. For those of you who are Kriya Bandhs, to practice your Kriya as a form of self-offering, not as a form of, I want to be happy, I want to be joyful, I want this, I want that. Offer those desires, even those are desires, good desires that they are. Offer everything up into God, offer everything up to the Guru, and try to use your Kriya practice as a form of surrender of the little self into the higher self, of a surrender of a giving oneself to the higher power, giving oneself to God. And you'll find that in this way we gain, we gain the ability to purify the heart, and very naturally that inner sound, that pranava sounds, the Holy Ghost sounds, the inner spirit will begin to manifest, and we feel ourselves in attunement with that divine flow. I want to conclude our class series here by reading something from the Holy Science, and it wraps up. It summarizes what we've discussed these past 8 weeks. And I think it's a good way to end here. It says, Swami Sri Yukteswar writes, "It has been clearly demonstrated in the foregoing pages that love is God, not merely as the noblest sentiment of a poet, but as an aphorism of eternal truth. To whatever religious creed a man may belong, and whatever may be his position in society, if he properly cultivates this ruling principle naturally implanted in his heart, he is sure to be on the right path, to save himself from wandering in this creation of darkness, Maya. It has been shown in the foregoing pages how love may be cultivated, how by its culture it attains development, and when developed through this means only, how man may find his spiritual preceptor, through whose favor he again becomes baptized in the holy stream." Now I'm going to read that again. It has been shown in the foregoing pages how love may be cultivated, how by its culture it attains development, and when developed through this means only, the development of love, how man may find his spiritual preceptor, and through whose favor he again becomes baptized in the holy stream, that's the Om, and sacrifices himself before the altar of God, becoming united with the Eternal Father forever and ever. This little volume is therefore concluded with the earnest exhortation to the reader never to forget the great goal of life. In the words of the illumined saint Shankaracharya, life is always unsafe and unstable, like a drop of water on a lotus leaf. The company of a divine personage, even for a moment, can save and redeem us. Now let us keep that in mind. The company of great ones, seek out good company. And I've heard, and people have said, oh, I'm seeking a guru, I'm not interested in satsang, I'm not interested, and I'm only interested in guru. No. Seek out the company of people who have uplifting consciousness. And in that, you will then be guided to ultimately develop the magnetism and the purity of heart to be able to draw to you. Satsanga, this is called satsanga. Seek satsanga, seek the company of others, meditate with others, put yourself in the company and follow that advice that Sri Yukteswar gave early in our discussion, that as you begin to quest, you're naturally going to be impelled to reach out and seek others of like mind. Don't ignore that. Seek other people of like mind, and in that you'll gain the magnetism to attract the right teachings, the right teacher, the right circumstances to you. And very naturally, as you do that, the heart begins to be purified because you're in good company. And then actively put your attention on developing the love of the heart, and you'll find everything else takes its own course in its own time. In the love of the heart, we speak about, it's part of it, moderating the likes and dislikes, you could say the ups and downs, being even-minded and cheerful, and sharing that, whatever you've gained, sharing that with others as an act of love, because what you find is as you begin to develop purity of the heart, you want it for everybody. And I'll conclude just by reminding you that when Swami Kriyananda first read the autobiography of a yogi, and he said, I've got to, this man has something that I want. He took the bus from New York City to Los Angeles, and he said, as he was going across country, he had two thoughts. He said, I want God. That is what I want. And he knew that Yogananda would have the power to be able to give him what he wanted. He says, I want God. And then the second thought came, and this is so wonderful, I want to share that God, that thought, these teachings, I want to share it with all. And so one of the highest prayers you can make is, Lord, give me thyself so that I can share thee with all. Share thee with others. So thank you for joining me over these last 8 weeks. It's been a fun journey, and if you have further questions, please send them in. You can send them to the Ananda online, and they'll get to me, and if you give me your email address, I'll be happy to respond directly to you in that way. So until the next time, we have our next class series, probably sometime after Christmas. We'll have another class series on another topic, and I wish you all joy and Godspeed, and may God and Gurus ever be with you. Joy to you.